The Feudal Future Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Feudal Future Podcast. I'm Marshall Toplansky.
I'm Joel Kotkin.
And today, Joel, we're going to continue our cities series, where we dive deeply into how cities are operating and what cities are all about. And to help us, we've got two really fascinating guests who have been deeply involved in municipal politics. Marjan Filauer is managing director of Mercury's San Francisco office. She brings 3 decades of experience in government and politics, strategic communications. She used to be senior advisor to Mayor London Breed of San Francisco. And we have Carol Robinson, who's associate professor and interim dean of external affairs at Texas Southern University in their School of Public Affairs. Professor Robinson is also a former at-large member of the Houston City Council in Texas. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you.
Joel, you want to kick us off?
I mean, one of the reasons we asked both of you is there's certainly a dialogue out there that cities are moving further and further towards the progressive left. Obviously, you have the case of New York is very prominent, but in the case of San Francisco and Houston, there seems to be a return to maybe a sense of realism and about getting the job done. Obviously, there are 2 cases. Houston was never woke, from what I can tell, but it was more traditional, some more traditional liberal politics. But Carol, what led to Whitmire's election, the new mayor, and what do you think he's doing? And is this a move in a different direction?
Look, I think I'd say John Whitmire, but he's a former state senator, 50 years in the state Senate, centrist Democrat, for lack of a better description. And I think he won the race because folks saw him as the coalition candidate who could put together, we do nonpartisan elections in Houston. So he was the one candidate who could put together a large chunk of Democrats and a large chunk of what I would describe as the old Herbert Walker Bush, G.W. Bush Republicans. Combine those two, and he beat Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who folks would have described as the progressive. I don't think Congresswoman Lee would have seen herself necessarily as progressive as opposed to being a traditional Republican. But Whitmire won on an agenda around police, fixing an issue around firefighters' pension, and dealing with infrastructure issues in the city. And folks wanted to get back to those kind of basics. We were having water mains break. Water bills were increasing, and he was the candidate talked about addressing those basic what I call city issues, and he got elected.
Is that
and what about in
San Francisco? Yeah,
in San Francisco, where it's kind of the poster child for post-COVID, for disruption in COVID, for the decline of safety and cleanliness in
insanity
center cities, and then with the rejection of Mayor Breed, we've seen kind of a turnaround. What do you make of all of that? And is it continuing?
Yeah, I mean, I think San Francisco is such an interesting place. I don't know if there's just something in the water or the air. I mean, we have statewide and national leaders come out of San Francisco and people describing the politics here as a knife fight in a phone booth, which it definitely is. There's also,
Wait, you look pretty good for somebody who was in a knife fight in a phone booth.
I know, just got to use a lot of hairspray. But for folks who folks who are living here and folks who are seeing the day-to-day, and if you watch Stranger Things, I mean, it really is like the upside down here. You have the very far left and the very far right who have been teaming up together for the better part of the past 2 decades to elect the kind of decision makers that lead to, ironically, more extreme left policies. And so now we're in a period where, in Mayor London Breed, who ascended to the mayoralty after the untimely death of Mayor Ed Lee. So, there was that tragedy in the city. And then, being the leader in the nation on COVID and COVID response, and also leading the way in police reform, but also increasing public safety. So now we're seeing the benefits. And, I do support this mayor, Mayor Lurie. He's out there every day and continuing the policies that were actually started by Mayor Breed. But in my view, the rejection of Mayor Breed was also circumstantial. We had a very volatile and intense mayor's race, where you want to talk about progressive and moderate, which I believe are completely devoid of meaning in this city right now. You had Mayor London Breed and interim Mayor Mark Farrell, who was briefly mayor after Ed Lee's death, basically causing a scene, right? And for Daniel Lurie, who got in there and rolled up his sleeves and got the second place votes, because we have a nonpartisan municipal races, but there's also ranked choice voting. And so that carried him. He, was able to get the second place votes, a large number of second place votes that carried him into the mayor's office. But we're still grappling with a lot of the issues that we were grappling with 5 years ago. And while there aren't as many graphic images on Fox News or on the internet about what's happening in San Francisco, we're still extremely short in police officers. We're still seeing a lot of public drug use. Unfortunately, just last week, a member of Urban Alchemy, which is a nonprofit that helps support community safety and work with folks in the Tenderloin, an employee was shot and killed for asking someone to stop using drugs. So, progressive, moderate, and how Trump is affecting that, and how New York is affecting what's happening here in San Francisco. I mean, the people who are paying the highest price for it are the residents. And I would argue that from the period of 2019 until last year, we were moving in a more to the center from the far left. We were seeing less calls to defund and dismantle the police from the very top levels of government on the Board of Supervisors, to more of, let's give the police technologies that they can use to increase public safety. I will say, though, the results of 2024 in some particular races here in San Francisco, I think, have led to the reversal of a few recalls that happened, right? We recalled a district attorney who was a former public defender, so that was interesting. And then recalled some members of the school board who weren't getting kids back in school, right? But all of that it's been reversed. So in my view, San Francisco is moving a little bit more to the left, which, I was born here and then, did my thing, college in DC. But then when I came back in 2005, we've since seen the pendulum swing a couple of times, and we're in the midst of that. And I think San Francisco is moving to the left.
Just curious, is that partially a reaction to Trump?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Because here in Los Angeles, I mean, Mayor Bass, it's hard to prove incompetence more consistently. And yet, because of her opposition to ICE, she's going to be reelected, I think, in a walk, in a city that it's hard to find an Angelino who doesn't think things are worse than they were.
Well, and these are when you talk to Angelinos, and I don't know, but we're going to need to also think about New York. I would love to get your opinion on that too. But from an Angelino perspective, there are just really basic bread and butter issues that people care about, like making sure that the streets are safe downtown, and getting the graffiti off the buildings, and having a sense of civil order, not draconian civil order, but at least just, civilized conversations. That seems to be missing in here. And I wonder the degree to which the Trump polarization has deflected conversation around these kind of basic issues, or whether it's reinforced the focus on them. What do you guys think about that?
Oh, if I may, I have something to say about this. So I'm an elected member of our local Democratic Party, and that was part of the move to a more moderate Democratic system here last spring, right? Which was then, it was stopped in the fall. But so I'm the second vice chair, and our chair, we were a slate of candidates that was elected on public safety, on supporting local businesses, on increasing housing availability and affordability. And what's happened is, and even at the state party, a group of us brought a resolution to the state party earlier this year to, the last position the state party took until this past June, the position of record of the California Democratic Party was to defund the police. That was still there. So we brought forward a measure from the San Francisco Democratic Party to say, hey, we should support communities, we should support public safety, and we should support fully staffing our local police departments, and of course, support community policing and all the stuff that residents are asking for. Well, there was recently another meeting of the executive committee of our local Democratic Party where the chair of our party, there was this, the narrative was, of course, around ICE and understandably like what we're seeing in our streets with ICE and how our immigrant communities are so deeply affected and afraid. But it was completely in reaction to Trump. It was about sharing automated license plate reader data with federal authorities. And the chair of our party, who is a career, almost 30-year career prosecutor, Chinese, which is another community that's been very underrepresented in elected officials here in San Francisco, said, hey, we don't have to share with ICE, but the first 6 hours when a child is missing or when a crime is committed, that's when we're able to find that child or that older person. And the more extreme wing of the party, including folks from San Francisco who, maybe their elected official was recalled in 2019, there's been a whole campaign around organized labor to go after the chair of the party for saying that she supports ICE. So we're in this, all she was saying was, listen, I'm a career prosecutor. I understand how data is shared. San Francisco is a sanctuary city. We all support that. However, with automated license plate reader, which San Francisco just got in 2024, right, at a broad scale. Let's be smart and protective of our communities and ensure that we're doing the right thing in how we share things. Yeah. And that has been totally taken out of context. And now the frame, instead of talking about safer communities and keeping families here in the city and making housing more affordable, has become this, you guys are all Trump Democrats.
Polemics, right?
Support Trump.
Yeah. Now, and Carol, we got to hear what Carol has to say about this.
Because I assume the dynamic in Houston, the city, obviously I know reasonably well, and Carol knows much better than I do. What's the dynamic in Houston? It's a huge immigrant community there too.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna do Houston, but I want to be a little broader, and let me be broad and then come back to Houston. I mean, we can't have this conversation outside the context of what the data is telling us right now about where the Democratic Party is in America. Is even more unfavorable than Donald Trump is. That's the reality of what the data is telling us.
By about 10 points, yeah.
Yeah, and we know this may be a snapshot at the moment, but folks forget what. And I'm not a Trump person. I'm a political scientist, and what folks seem to forget is issues and quality of candidate matters in a campaign. And a lot of times, folks in the extreme wings of both parties get caught up in what they want to be caught up in and lose track of what's really going on. Look, if Whitmire runs for re-election in Houston, he'll be re-elected because he can put together a bipartisan coalition. And even if we had ranked choice voting in Houston, it would still be hard to beat him because you have to have a quality opponent who's more in touch with the issues that are of concern to voters. Yes, ICE is an issue even in Houston, but ICE doesn't dominate the policy landscape because folks have other concern, and the mayor and council have been focused on those concern, even the county commissioners. I mean, like literally, we're going to lose what most folks 8 years ago thought was a rising star in Democratic Party and party in Texas and nationally, Alina Hidalgo.
Right.
So when I look at what's happening across the country, I tell folks this in Texas and Houston. The people who decide elections are not the partisans in either party. It's the people who never vote in either party's primary that show up in general elections. And you better make sure you have an issue matrix that speak to them and also can hold on to your base. I don't know what happens in the 2026 election. I tell you what my take on New York is. New York is, man, the likely mayor was lucky that he got two weak opponents, and he had a Mayor Adams who imploded.
Yeah.
Mayor Adams was not going to be reelected. He started out thinking he was the model, but then the true nature of him came out, and he imploded. He was terrible at policy. He was corrupt. Anybody was going to beat that guy. Karen Bass can be beaten, but you got to have a candidate,
Right.
sufficient
Right.
money, and the right conversation about issues. I mean, out here in California right now, you are having a conversation about loss of land, lack of home insurance, the cost of rebuilding, but you just don't have anyone stepping up to offer ideas and solutions. And when you have to run a political campaign, you want to be a candidate. The campaign starts before the calendar says the campaign has started. And I mean, I'm going to tell you what the real lucky issue for Mayor Bass is I think it's Caruso, the guy that ran against her last time, wants to run for governor.
Right.
If he'd concentrate on saying, I really want to be mayor again, as it looked like that's what he was going to do after the fires and talking about what happened with underfunding of the fire department. And then the next thing you know, he's looking at a governor's race. I mean, that's going to be the greatest thing that happens to her to reinsure her election. It's not the ICE issue, because a lot of people are not as into LA being a sanctuary city, are not into being in the mall or even on Rodeo Drive and people smashing and grabbing jewelry.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, this is really a great segue into maybe diving one level deeper, which is, your point is that you have to have somebody that's going to speak to the issues. And Marjan's point is that you have a very fragmented group of people, so you don't know whose issues you're really addressing, whether you're addressing kind of the anti-Trump group of people or the bread and butter people. Well, is there enough civic will amongst everybody and civic focus that can actually tie groups together? Or are we looking at basically ungovernable areas?
Well, quick, because I know both cities reasonably well. Houston is very different than San Francisco. It's more diverse in terms of its class base. It's more, it still has one of the big problems we have to deal with these issues is in California, we have a one-party system. So, the kind of coalition that Whitmire could put together, there is no way of doing that. I mean, Rick Caruso, actually, who had been a lifelong Republican, is now a Democrat, theoretically. And so I think it's very hard to get to these issues when you have a one-party system. And of course, in Texas, the cities have to fight back against a Republican government.
But are there issues that you go across those boundaries that unite, are we just in such a disarray? And maybe Houston works because there's less of that,
right?
But what's your sense of it? It seems to me that we're in a time frame where we're seeing unprecedented polarization and no consensus on anything ever emerges. What's your sense?
Look, I think there's a lot of consensus out there. It's not that the politicians listen, homeowners care about the fact that whether it's because of fire or flooding, the cost of home insurance and the ease of securing home insurance has become a problem. Literally in Texas, it was the Republican Attorney General who filed suit against car insurance companies for using the tracking data to jack up the cost of car insurance. I can't tell you how many people, not just in Houston, but across Texas and across the country, who are complaining about the increase in their electricity bill. We want innovation, but the regular consumer don't want to carry the cost of the cost of electricity going up. But there's there's really nobody speaking to it. I mean, folks made fun of Trump in the last campaign, but my dad sent 6 kids to college off tips, and I'm old enough to remember when I started out as a room service waiter, and they ultimately started taxing tips for a lot of people who work in that space, even though he hadn't fully fulfilled that commitment. I'm really shocked that nobody is talking about, in terms of, let's say, Democrats, actual literal fix. If you want to fix Social Security, just lift the cap on income subject to FICA. But we have to fight in the context of income tax. But the thing that would help more working class people is like literally putting that money in Social Security and stop borrowing it to run the government. But the politicians aren't having a real conversation. Most politicians aren't having a real conversation that would really move voters. And 26 and 28 may be an opportunity to have that kind of conversation. We have a more realistic conversation at the city level, because Tuesday is the day they pick up my garbage. If the garbage doesn't get picked up on Tuesday, I know it didn't get picked up on Tuesday. I have to pay a water bill every month. So every time the city raises the water bill, I have to pay property taxes. And that's a big issue in Houston and across the country. Folks just don't want to pay for lack of quality delivery.
Or any delivery for that matter. So you're talking about basic home economics, bread and butter issues are not being addressed.
No.
And Marjan, I'm thinking that Dan Lurie got elected because he focused on some basic home economics issues,
certainly,
right?
So he certainly is focusing on that. And, there have been folks on the Board of Supervisors and others in the city who are asking him, how come you're not talking about Trump? Right? Everybody in America is responding to Trump, mayors, and he's not. And I appreciate that focus, right? I'm not talking about Trump today because someone just got killed across from City Hall and people, can't get into the schools that they need to get into. And, the treasurer's office here in San Francisco, the top person in the treasurer's office just got put on leave for corruption charges, right? So that's what this mayor's focusing on. But we need more than one, despite the fact that he's the mayor and he's got a very powerful pulpit. We need someone besides the mayor focusing on that as well. And it means we can't have an adversarial Board of Supervisors. However, we are about to move into a majority progressive Board of Supervisors here. The mayor, there was a supervisor who was just recalled across the way from where I live because he closed a road, a main artery right next to where most of his residents live, or many of his concerned residents live, to turn it into a park, right? And so when you talk about our city's governable, I'm interpreting that as, can the government run the city on its own? And I think what's happening in San Francisco, because of the extremism that we've seen here, and we're only 7-8% Republican here, so the extremism is on the left. And that extremism has infiltrated our bureaucracy and has been reflected in the policies that our government has enacted over many years. And that's why usually there's a pendulum swing. Yeah. But now we're in a period where in 2024, that pendulum swing was interrupted. So it was prematurely interrupted. It was moving towards the center. It's now moving back towards the left. And we are going to see more slow progress. And then when you talk about the extreme policies, which is a version of kicking the can down the road, of making the tough decisions you should have made 20 years ago. So the people who are now paying the price of extreme policies, term limits, which, law of the land, 1990, statewide term limits went into effect here in California. So you have folks who are running for office and then immediately wondering what they're going to do for their next job. You have people getting elected to the Board of Supervisors who've never had to balance a budget and who are learning how to balance a budget or even, pass a budget. And they're wondering, well, where am I going to work next, right? Because of term limits. And so I think we're also paying the price for that. Coupled with, as you had mentioned earlier, running campaigns. I've done every job in a campaign. I've done almost every job in government. I've been elected to office, and I've also been defeated in my pursuit of being elected to office. And I think how those campaigns are run now, they're doing an excellent job in capitalizing on the extreme policies that are causing families to flee the city or to be afraid and to make emotional decisions based on the fear and uncertainty that has been imposed upon them by extreme left policymakers here in the city. So I'm not saying it's not governable. It's slower than it needs to be. And fast change happens when bad things happen, when somebody dies who shouldn't be, right?
Yeah.
Like a block away in August 2023, a block away from my house, a shopkeeper was killed. A friend of ours, because someone was trying to steal 2 beers, right? And that's kind of what finally led to people coming on board and saying, we need automated license plate readers. We need to have drones because we're 500 police officers short, and in our neighborhood at any given time, there may be.
You're raising a really an interesting point. It's kind of a hot button for me, which is if you think about governments as an organization, they were intentionally designed to not be fast.
Right.
Speed is not part of the equation. Right. And yet technology is actually driving the world to change faster.
Right.
And so it seems to me we have a basic disconnect between how governments were designed to begin with and how they're actually, what forces they have to respond to today. That sounds to me like government needs to be more responsive to technological changes and the adoption of new technology. Do you see that appetite changing within governments?
Yeah.
Well, I will say we have a lot of folks getting elected to office here in San Francisco by interest groups who are demonizing technological advances, right?
How ironic is that right? This is the home of AI and it's like, get this AI the hell out of here.
Right. So people saying if you're in the pocket of tech, if you are a tech worker, if you are a tech company, at this point, everybody has a website. That's tech. If you don't have a website, you're not in business, right? So you're electing people who are questioning, the utility of technology. I'm sure that happened around electricity. Like, I'm not sure we need it, right? Mm-hmm. What happened to them?
Well, Friedman wrote a great piece about calling all Luddites. At the time, young guy running for public advocate in New York made the observation that the city is so big, few people can't govern it. It would be better to utilize technology to have all the people in the city help solve the problem as bottom up as opposed to a top down. The saddest thing that's happened during the Trump administration is the fact that modernization has become such a demonized phenomenon. And the reality is government at all levels has to become more modernized. I'm sure everybody on this call lived through, where was I? I went to Miami a couple months back, and as I travel the country now, it's rare to see cabs anymore. And I remember when Uber first came along, municipal governments just did not know what to do with Uber because we made so much money off cab medallions. And it took us a long time, and some of that is still out there. Airbnb came along. We made money off hotel occupancy taxes, so we just started pulling our hair out. And technology and the customer experience for people outside of government continues to speed up, but folks in government, no matter how much longevity they have in government, just have, to me, seem to have turned a blind eye for the need for government to increase, to become faster, quicker, more efficient at customer service. I can't remember if it's UPS or FedEx. One of them figured out that if they eliminated left turns, they saved on gasoline because for them, fuel was such a high cost. For folks in the city, I'm just going to do Houston, they don't care that fuel is a high cost. So we have avoided using technology to make the garbage routes more effective, to make the city vehicle fleet more effective, to improve. I think somewhere there was like 24 law enforcement agencies we can't even agree to coordinate and use technology
amongst
to
them.
more efficiently police the city, just in terms of where the police cars are going to route themselves during the course of a day to reduce the likelihood of crime or be more visible. And so it's not just San Francisco, sadly, it's just I don't know if it's a lack of vision, a fear of the new, but government at the municipal level is way behind what it needs to do to be more effective, because at some point, people are going to get tired of paying more in taxes.
Right.
And so they have the benefit of moving. The thing that's come out of the post-pandemic reality is more and more companies have decided we'll use technology to maximize productivity, and you don't have to be physically present where we want you to work. And residents are starting to have that freedom to keep their insurance but move physically. So I think
Right.
that's a manifestation we're going to see
and
more
vote
of.
with their feet
Right.
in a sense.
Yeah. And
Joel,
you
as
see
we move
that,
toward
go
as we
ahead.
move toward the end of our
Right.
time, why don't you ask the last question?
Sure. What I'm wondering is, obviously we've dealt with a lot of the downsides. What is your view of where cities are going to go in the next 5 years? I mean, will they wake up to how to use technology? I mean, I find it ironic that there's probably more receptivity to technology in Houston than in the capital of technology in San Francisco. So where do you see this going in the next 5 years? I mean, another 5 years of urban decay would be kind of catastrophic.
I think it's a mixed bag in San Francisco. I think residents are going to move the adaptation to technology. I mean, we're seeing that with self-driving cars here now with Waymos, where originally people were very reticent, like, what does this mean? There's no one in this car. And now the approval ratings for Waymos are just through the roof.
Wow.
And people, I mean, for me, I mean, I have a daughter and I would rather put her in a Waymo that follows every rule of the road without someone in there who's trying to, talk to her. I feel safer doing that. And so I think there's going to be this tension in San Francisco between the rhetoric that gets extreme leftists elected and the practicality of technology that's actually helping our lowest income people here in the city. And then you've got the tension with the people who purport to represent the lowest income people, who don't support housing, who don't support public safety. There was a study and some data released recently around where our Latino community has been the most severely impacted by violent crime here, right? And yet the far left, I mean, they're talking about ICE and they're talking, there's that definitely needs to be addressed, and we have to protect those underserved communities and those that are targeted. But at the same time, city leaders need to stop kind of testing what's going out there and start to do the right thing. And even, in City Hall, I think that the advances in AI and just daily technology use and by the people who work there will drive that advancement. But will San Francisco moderate in its political views? It has come a long way without having to do that. So if it's not broke yet, there hasn't been the kind of revolt against that kind of leadership. And I think part of it is, San Francisco, there is something in the air and water that kind of, you see things here that in any other city you wouldn't see politically.
Well, is there something in the air in Houston?
Well, what's in the air in Houston is prosperity.
Yeah.
Literally, I think in the next 5 years, Houston is going to be an even more prosperous city. If Whitmire runs, he's likely to be reelected. The person that's probably going to run against him, one of two, probably is either two young African-American men, or one of them will run, but they're more moderate. I think Houston is committed to the idea of improving public service, police, fire, municipal employee picking up the garbage. We're going to have probably a big debate in the next 5 years about do we implement a garbage fee to improve garbage services, or either we swap it for an old water fee. So we're going to have I think, a conversation about what do we trade off in terms of revenue streams to improve services that need to be improved. I think the city of Houston continues to grow. We probably will be outgrown by the county, but I think a lot of places, we have a lot of what's called unincorporated area in the county. They'll probably want to do deals with the city for water and other kind of basic services. We'll probably see a gradual change in the state. Right now, I think the legislature is fighting between, let's call them the Trump MAGA and traditional Republicans. And so a lot of that they've taken out on cities and trying to over supervise cities. I think some of that goes away because nobody's really paying attention to it. But what the redistricting in Texas has done is it is drawn a lot of the more conservative Republicans out of the legislature. And we'll probably end up, if the map holds up, sending a lot of extremely conservative state house members to Washington, D.C., and you get a younger generation of Republicans, and we get a younger generation of city council members. In 2027, because we now have 2 4-year limits for city council members, we will lose about 6 or 7 city council members. But we're a pretty unique place. We get a lot of younger folks running, so I think the younger people being more used to technology and innovation will bring that with them into city government, and we'll see the same thing. We'll end up with a new county judge in 2026. It'll be somebody likely younger. If not, it'll be a former mayor of the city, Anise Parker, is running. So if she becomes county judge, then the city and the county will have a better relationship because you'll have a former mayor as the county judge with a more moderate mayor, Whitmire or Ed Pollard or Chris Hollins or somebody else. So in the next 5 years, Houston is going to be pretty focused on basic, which revenue stream generates enough for us to do the basic kind of things we need to do, protect our water system.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from both of you is that there's a combination of practicality and younger demographics that will be driving where cities go in the future, and it's going to be an exciting time to look at it. And I just wanted to, on behalf of Joel and I, thank you guys for really a very stimulating conversation on the Feudal Future podcast. And we look forward to having you come back one of these days and talk more about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific.
The Feudal Future.